to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. I am your host, Matthew Loomis. This show is sponsored by BuildYourOwnBlog.net, the full-service destination for people who want to start their own WordPress blog and achieve long-term success. Visit BuildYourOwnBlog.net to start your new blog today. My guest has been business blogging for over 10 years. He is also a published author, website designer, social media expert, and speaker who works from home, consistently producing content that helps website owners become more efficient with their blogs and building their own tribes and boosting their online sales. So let's get our chronicle on with Mike Allton. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mike, I'm looking forward to talking to you today about blogging. We'll get into your personal story a bit, and we'll go over some blogging tips that you have, and then I'd like to wrap up with some blog monetization. So are you ready to jump in?
That's fantastic. I can talk about blogging all day long. How much time do we have?
Well, typically 30 to 45 minutes, but
all right.
Let's shoot for that, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So, Mike, how long have you been blogging?
Well, that's funny. I've been officially blogging over 10 years. And I say that officially because it was about 10 years ago that I actually had a blog, and I was writing content for it to support a business. Before that, I had been doing websites for myself, for other people. So I had been writing for the web. I've been writing on the web, but I never really considered it blogging until I moved to St. Louis and started my own business, and that was in 2007. And I started to write, blog articles, content as a part of trying to promote and build that business.
Yeah, I want to get into that for a little bit here in a minute. So how many blogs have you started during your 10 years?
It's really just two. I mean, it was the first one, for myself speaking, it was the first one, for that particular business, which didn't work actually. Not that blogging in particular wasn't working, but I was writing about social media. I was writing about blogging and online marketing, and it wasn't working for that business because those were only tangential to what I was selling with that business, which was more just web design stuff. So 4 years ago, 2012, I started the Social Media Hat specifically so I could blog about blogging and social media and email marketing. So that was the second blog that I started. And I mean, that first business is long gone. It's now, this is what I do. I write and talk about content marketing.
Yeah, you're so good at it too. I've always enjoyed following you. I think I started following you in 2012, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, I know bouncing back and forth for years. So
I know we're in the same city. We have yet to meet up.
Yeah, well, you say that, but growing up, me saying somebody's in the same city as me, that means we could walk to each other's houses.
That's true.
You and I do not live within walking distance, not even close.
Right.
I mean, we're like on opposite sides of the greater metro area, if I'm not mistaken. So it's, I think you're probably an hour away from me.
Yeah, it's close to an hour actually.
Yeah.
Which is weird because we're both fairly close to St. Louis, but yeah. We've got a little bit of a gap there.
Right.
So, Mike, looking back at all, these 10 years, I want to know, how has blogging changed your life?
Well, it's profound. It's rather phenomenal how blogging has changed my life because it has allowed me to not just work from home, to not just work on my own, but to be reasonably successful at it. Before I moved to St. Louis, I was living in a small town in Ohio. I'd been doing IT sales and some web design, but basically it was just being the sales manager for a small IT company in a small town in Ohio, and that did not work out very well. I mean, it was a great company, great family that we worked together as, but it's a small town. And so, everything you do, you're scraping by to make a living. And I got tired of that, and I went and sold pools and hot tubs for a couple years, which was fun, but also not hugely awesome as a career choice. And I took a break from that and did business development a little bit. And in doing the business development, I discovered that I really liked working from home. I liked being my own boss, being responsible for my own time. I found that I had the self-discipline to be able to do that. But yeah, changing direction again when I moved to St. Louis and starting a new business, my own business, and starting to use a blog to promote that. It changed my life. Yeah, I've been able to, like I said, work from home, run my own business. I'm now, I've turned and leveraged that experience really over the past 4 years. And I'm now the full-time chief marketing officer for SiteCell. It's still somewhat of a consultant-client relationship. They're a Canadian company, so I'm not an actual employee, even though we all act and look like I'm an employee. But from a technical perspective, they're a client. It's just they're my only client.
Okay.
And so that's all been made possible thanks to my blog.
Yeah. So aren't you like their chief marketing officer or something?
Yep. I'm the CMO for SiteCell. So the social media hat, interestingly for me today, is a hobby.
Okay.
It's a side gig, a side hustle. I make some passive income from there, but what I really enjoy is using it as a testing ground. If a new tool comes across my desk, a new technique for blogging or social media or any of those things, I can test it on my own site. I can test it on my own profiles before I ever start talking about it or referring clients to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoy about you is you're willing to test things and then reveal those results to everybody.
Yeah, and
the good and the bad.
Enough, they're not always good. I'll be the first. Sometimes it's the tool, sometimes it's the user of the tool. I'll be the first to admit I made plenty of mistakes, and I think you're right. I mean, I think that's one of the popular aspects of my blog in particular is that most of my writing is sharing what I've done wrong, what I've found, how I've changed, whatever the case might be. And people appreciate that. They like learning from my mistakes so that they can go off and make, all new mistakes on their own.
Yeah. Mike, since you brought up working from home, a lot of people that listen to this show want to work from home. And so I was just curious, what do you find to be the biggest obstacle for you when it comes to working from home?
Well, I think the challenge for me and for many others is always having other distractions that can intrude themselves. I mean, that's not necessarily different from work. You've got coworkers and other things that go on in an office environment. And believe me, I've been there. I mean, I've worked for Fortune 500 companies, had the regular 9-to-5 job with a cubicle and everything. So I know what it's like to have somebody else come over to your cubicle and talk to you, or you're tempted to go over to their cubicle and just have a conversation, and 30 minutes later, all you've been doing is talking about the latest episode of Survivor.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. And you got no work done during that period. And so the same thing happens here at home. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. We've got 2 kids. The oldest one's in kindergarten now, so she's gone most of the day. But there are interruptions. There are distractions throughout the day. So there's that. There's the danger of having those interruptions overwhelm and take too much away from what you're doing. The other danger, I think, is that it's a little easier if you're working from home to not stop working.
Yes.
It's super easy to go into the office or up to the office after dinner, on the weekends, whatever the case might be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you have some kind of awareness over, what you're doing, how much time you're putting in, where's that balance between family and work and the other things in your life that need to be balanced, and making sure that you're spending your time where you need to spend your time.
Yeah, it can be so
Sometimes that's at work,
challenging.
sure.
Yeah.
Particularly if, you're a startup, if you're just starting your blog,
Hmm.
you're going to have to put in some time. There's no other way around it. It's going to take time, and the more hours and effort and time you put up front, the sooner you're going to build your blog to the point where you're really happy with where it's going. So that has to be taken into consideration.
Right.
But again, on the other hand, as you are going along, you don't want to sacrifice too much.
Yeah. So you're talking like your family and things like that.
Right.
As far as sacrifice goes. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, are you the type of person that do you ever go out to a coffee shop and work?
I don't. I have a third floor loft that's fairly removed from the home. The one thing I lack is an actual door, so I don't have a literal barrier or boundary to keep the kids out of here. But that's not so much of an issue. So I'm able to come up to the office whenever I want to or whenever I need to. So for instance, a lot of people ask me, how am I able to write so much? Well, I usually have time set aside specifically for writing. Like Saturday afternoons, my kids are usually sleeping, napping. So I usually have 3-4 hours as a block that I can come up here. It's on a Saturday, so I'm not going to get, interrupted by, site sell, employees or another client who might be emailing me or anything like that. I can put all that aside and just focus on getting done what I want to get done.
So you spend most of your time creating content for the social media hat on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
About 3 or 4 hours a week.
Give or take, sometimes less. And one of the nice things about my particular site is I get approached quite often by other bloggers, other brands in particular, who want to publish on my site. And I used to accept anybody who came to me and realized, and again, one of those mistakes, that wasn't such a hot idea. So for a while, I just totally stopped accepting any kind of guest contribution at all. And this year, I've relaxed that restriction a bit. If somebody I know, like if you wanted to publish on my site, I'd be happy to work with you and allow you to do that, because we have a relationship. I know you. I know what you're doing, and I know you're not doing it just for the backlink. Like most of the people who fill out the form on my site, even though my form says I don't accept guest contributions, which is kind of funny because then if you fill out that form, I know you can't read.
Right.
But then brands will approach me, and some of those are, sponsored content. I mean, if it's clear that they just want to talk about their product, that's not a deal breaker. Now that's an opportunity for me to sell them on a sponsored post. So my point is that a portion of the content that I publish throughout the year, I didn't have to write. Somebody else wrote it. And I'm just taking the time, usually on Sundays, we'll go to church and lunch, and then we come home. And again, now it's time for the kids to go down. So again, I'll have a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon free. And, unless something else is going on, that's usually the time for me to just prep a post for Monday morning.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So you do some sponsored content.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the fun things that I'm testing. Like everything else is one big experiment for me. But yeah, I experiment with, okay, so obviously it's nice to get, a few $100 or something like that for an article, but I'm also taking a hard look at what are the results, what's the impact of doing that. Some brand gives me an article, I vet it. I had to go back and forth several times with a brand earlier this year because their first article was just garbage, and they needed to edit it. And I offered to, obviously charge them for editing, and they decided to do it themselves. So it took them a little longer, but eventually once they got it to me and it was okay, as to my, level of quality, so to speak. We publish it, and then we look at, okay, what happens? What's the difference in response between something I've written and one of these kinds of contributed posts? Do people like it as much, less, whatever the case might be?
Mm-hmm.
Are people sharing it as much? Are they clicking through to, whatever links that particular brand had put in there? So that's interesting to look at.
Yeah, it really is. So when it comes to you creating your own content, I'm curious, how do you come up with so many great ideas?
Oh, that's a great question. And the answer is interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else. It's something I've called the blogger's mindset. And it starts with having a system for tracking every single idea you've ever had for a blog post. I use Evernote. People can use whatever they want. I like Evernote because I can create one notebook just for blog post ideas. And then I can create individual notes. For people who haven't used Evernote, it's just a note-taking app, right? And so you can create notes and just write in whatever you want. You can drag in images, links to websites, whatever you want. So, and it works on all of your devices. So I have an Evernote app on my phone, my laptop, and my iPad, which means no matter where I'm at, because I always have my iPhone, no matter where I'm at, if something occurs to me, that'd make a great blog post, I can quickly open up my phone, open up Evernote, and tap in a note. I even have my blog ideas notebook as the default notebook. So I just have to tap the start, the plus text, I think it is on the app, start a new note. It's automatically going to be in my blogging notebook. And maybe it's a title, maybe it's a topic, maybe it's a few sentences, whatever the case might be. And I record that in that moment. So there's none of this where you have an idea in the shower and then an hour later it's gone. Mm-hmm. Right? Because
that happens.
Because I get out of the shower, my phone's right there on the sink. I dry off, towel off, and record that idea. If I'm in the car, as soon as I have a moment, I can tap it into the phone. I can even voice record in there if I'm like Friday, I'm going to be driving to Ohio for Thanksgiving. That's an 8-9 hour drive. I'm going to have some ideas while I'm driving, staring at I-70, across Illinois. Something's going to occur to me, and I'm going to want to capture that idea as soon as I possibly can. So,
honey, can you take the wheel for a second?
Yeah. So that means that, number one, even if I'm out of the house, I'm not going to record an idea. I can also begin to write. I've written entire blog posts on my phone. I wouldn't recommend it because your thumbs start to hurt after a couple paragraphs. But you can, if you've got the time and the inclination. I mean, there have been times where the kids are asleep in the car. My wife goes into shopping. I'm just sitting in the car in a parking lot for 45 minutes to an hour. I blogged. Why not, right?
Yeah.
I didn't publish necessarily. I've tried that before. It's not pretty, so I don't do that. But I can record those thoughts and get them into Evernote, which I can then take and format and expand later on. But here's the real beauty. When you start doing that, you're going to begin to accumulate ideas. So then if you've got, like me, time set aside every day or every week to write, and I usually recommend people do every day, have an hour set aside every morning to write. It doesn't really work with my schedule, but that's what I recommend other people do, so that they have that time blocked off to write, not necessarily publish, but to write. They're practicing, they're growing, they're building on, they're expanding their ideas and their blog posts. The idea here is that when you sit down to do that, whenever that time is, you're not staring at a blank Word document thinking, well, okay, I need to blog now. Any moment now, an idea is going to come to me.
Right.
I'm going to write now. That doesn't happen to me. I may go into my Saturday afternoon with an idea of what I already want to write. That happens frequently, actually. But if I don't, all I have to do is sit down, open my Evernote, open my blog notebook, and I now have over 100 ideas for posts that haven't been published yet. Okay. Some of them are halfway written. Some of them are entirely written. And I can just skim through it and decide, oh, yeah, you know what? I want to write about Twitter ads today. That sounds interesting to me. And so I get into it. That's what I call the blogger's mindset, because as you develop that habit of recording ideas and beginning to think about how what you're doing on a day-to-day basis as you're moving through life, how that impacts or applies to your blog and your audience, you'll develop that blogger's mindset and you'll begin to see ideas for content where you never did before.
Fascinating. This is
it's
good,
like
good
a
stuff.
muscle that you exercise for creating ideas. It's a creativity muscle. So the more you use it, the better you get at it.
And thumb muscles too.
And thumb muscles. That's right.
So Mike, aside from being a prolific idea generator and blogger, obviously, from what you just told us, which is really cool, what would you say is another one of your biggest strengths as a blogger?
There's two of them that kind of go hand in hand to me. The first is that I tend to write about what I know. And that may be knowledge that I've gained over a great amount of time through experience and that sort of thing. But to me, that's in contrast to the person who wants to write about a topic that they don't necessarily know a lot about, and they have to go and research.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to do a bunch of research for a particular blog post, you have to understand that's going to take time. People often marvel at my ability to bang out a blog post in 45 minutes or less. And we're talking, long posts, 750 words or more.
Mm-hmm.
But I can do that because I'm talking about what I already know.
Hmm.
I'm sharing the information for the most part that's already in my head. And maybe that in itself is a skill. I don't know. But it seems to me that every time that I need to write about something that I'm not already very intimately familiar with, and I need to go out and do a bunch of research and testing and that sort of thing, that slows down the whole process immensely. Mm-hmm. And there's always a risk there that in that slowing of the process, you're going to become very much uninterested in that topic. And so I do try to encourage people, if it's applicable, if it's possible, to try to focus on topics where they're already in your wheelhouse. Because that's going to be a lot easier for you to just share what you know, organize your thoughts, make sure you're just explaining to your audience what you think they need to know about this particular topic that you already know. Mm-hmm. And you'll find it to be a lot easier. So
I get that. I do get that, Mike. But what if it's a topic that your audience wants or needs and you don't know much about it? Yeah,
and that's an example where it is applicable to do that research. And that's why it's so nice to have so many different blog topics and ideas already set. Because if you're not on a set publishing schedule, like I mentioned, Twitter ads. Okay, maybe my audience does need to know Twitter ads, but maybe my experience is very minimal with Twitter ads, so I need to gain that experience and that knowledge that I can then share. That might happen over time. Mm-hmm. I might decide, okay, the next couple months, I'm going to run some experiments. I'm really going to take the time to learn Twitter ads so that I can write about it intelligently. Meanwhile, I can't stop publishing blog content, right? I need to keep pushing out posts. So meanwhile, I've got these other topics that I can be developing and working on and publishing. And I can plan to publish this research article in a couple of months. Mm-hmm. That might be an approach. I mean, again, I get that, some people, some businesses, some bloggers may have a particular topic, and for whatever reason, their funnels, the timing, a sales campaign, the business model, whatever the case might be, they've identified a topic that they need that content sooner rather than later. And they're just going to have to bite the bullet and spend the next day, putting in whatever hours are necessary to research it and draft it and make sure it makes sense and get it published.
Absolutely.
But that's where the challenge is, because if you're writing about something that yesterday you didn't really know anything about that particular topic and you just spent the evening or the day researching it and learning what you can, when you try to then regurgitate that in the form of an article, that's hard. It's what we all did in college, and most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, the stuff that we wrote in college probably wasn't that great because it's not going to flow well when you just imbibed all that information a moment ago.
Right. I'm
Right.
laughing, looking back. Yeah.
I mean, you read a history book and then you wrote a 5-page essay about it, and well,
Right.
you got what you got. And that's, that's it. And we moved on. Because back then we didn't really care about the outcome. We wanted the grade, and then we wanted to move on and get out of the course. This is different. When we're sharing content with our audience, we're trying to help them, but we're also at the same time trying to continue to establish and build on our authority, our reputation. And to an extent, there needs to be a painstaking approach and perspective to our content. And sometimes, that means either, number one, recognizing that even though you put in a bunch of time, the end result was not good enough.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. I don't publish every single thing that I write because I've written crap. I really have. I've had bad ideas where, fortunately, they never really got out of the idea stage, and I've had ideas where they went all the way to the completed article, and at the end of the day, I'm rereading it and thinking, this still doesn't make sense to me, and I wrote it.
Right.
So you don't want to inflict that on your readers.
Right.
And that is hard because it's very subjective. If you're having trouble identifying that, either one way or the other, either you're not able to self-identify the bad, or you're being too hard on yourself. Those are the extremes. It's good to get another set of eyeballs, a spouse, a coworker, a colleague. It's really nice. It's easy for us in kind of the blogging and social media world because we're naturally connected to other bloggers and social media marketers, and can rather easily create little mastermind groups, little board of advisors, peers that we can run stuff by. Other bloggers, if you're in different niches, if you're a food blogger, a travel blogger, that's what you should aim for, is to have that collection of friends and peers who are in that same niche, who you can bounce ideas off of and even share drafts with. It's really simple to put something into a Google Doc and share a link with somebody, and they can read it and make comments on it.
Yeah.
And give you that really, really super important feedback that some of us, we have blinders on, and it's really hard for us to see that something is in fact bad, or, like I said, maybe it's not as bad as we think it is.
That's really good stuff, Mike. Obviously, collaboration is one of your biggest strengths.
Yep.
As a blogger, so what is something that you're not good at, and how do you overcome that deficiency?
Well, this actually kind of touched on it, because self-editing has never been a strong suit of mine. Funny story, when I was in high school, well, it's funny for me, I don't know. you can judge whether it's funny, right? When I was in high school, I was a decent student. I got good grades, particularly in English and history and those kinds of liberal arts subjects. And then when I was a sophomore, my parents were troubled because suddenly my English grades were falling off a cliff. And so they went and they talked to the teacher. I don't know if the teacher initiated or what, but they had a conversation with my English teacher, my sophomore English teacher. And she said that my problem was that her process was every week you'd have to write an essay. And this was like the first draft. And she'd review it and give it back to you with corrections. And then you had to resubmit it, cleaned up. And this was in 1990. All right. So this is a long time ago. And these were handwriting things. And frankly, I don't like to handwrite anything. Never have. So I never turned in the revised essays. Apparently, I was too lazy or whatever, and just felt like I didn't have to do that. So, of course, I was getting docked every single time for not doing the complete assignment. And this wonderful woman made the suggestion to my parents that they get for me a word processor. And again, this was 1990. So we're talking about 8086 computers, Commodores, that's the era back then.
Yeah.
So they did. They went out and they bought me a Quiltech 8086 PC that was running DOS, I want to say 5. This is a precursor to Windows for the millennials on the listening, right? And it was running Word Perfect. I don't know if you remember Word Perfect.
Wow. But back then it was state of the art.
It was. They probably dropped $1,000 on this system way back when, and all it could do was run Word Perfect and maybe one other thing. But it was a revolutionary, pivotal moment in my life. I mean, I kid you not, because not only did I now put all of those essays into the computer, she'd print them out, obviously, then turn them in as a draft, and she'd write them up, whatever the corrections are, and give it back to me, and then I'd revise them. So it not only turned around my English grade, but it revolutionized how I wrote.
Wow.
Everything then for me was done on the word processor. Every paper, every assignment, and things were stored there. And it was a lot easier then for me to convey my thoughts through typing rather than writing. And ironically enough, I still never learned to type. I'm just a really good Hunt and Pecker on the keyboard.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say you must have been proficient at typing at this point.
You'd think, right? No, never really. I mean, I think I took a beginner's course once.
Huh. Okay.
So I understand the principles, but never really focused enough to do it. So I can do 50, 60 words a minute, which is not bad for somebody who doesn't really know.
No, that's good. That's pretty good.
So then, and that just continued on, throughout the years, finished up high school with that and got to college and had my own computer in college at Ohio State. Same deal. It was just so much easier for me. Now, I didn't not have to write. I was stupid enough to do history as my focus. And you know anything about history, when you're in college studying history, virtually every single midterm and final exam is a blue book test. The blue books, do you remember those? Those they were just packets of paper with a blue cover. Right. And I don't remember how many pages were in these things, 40, 50 pages. But your job for the next 2 hours was to fill this with whatever topic the historian professor decided to make you write about.
The lovely essay test.
2 hours of handwriting.
Right. Now, if you thought your thumbs were sore now,
oh goodness,
your hands back then were just like mangled. Yeah,
but to answer your question, that whole story was there because I hate to self-edit, and I'm really particularly bad at it. I force myself to do it today, but I hate to do it. I'll reread the post. Thank God for spell check, right? So at least the main typos are automatically caught. I try to skim through it and look for words that are spelled right and but aren't what I meant.
Do you use Grammarly?
No, and I should, but I'm too lazy.
I don't. When I read your stuff, I think it's fine. I think it's good.
Well, I appreciate that, and it helps that I was so good at English throughout high school and college. I went through honors English, AP English. Once I got over this issue in sophomore English, I was a stud as far as English is concerned. Right. So grammar, speaking, presenting, writing, there's never been problems for me. And that's I get awesome. That other people, that's not going to be their strong suit. They'll need to bring in more help for that.
That's an awesome lesson, I think, for all the new bloggers out there that feel like they're not proficient or not adequate with their skill set, and that they can develop those skills and just with a little innovation and creativity, you can overcome these obstacles.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, none of us are born able to do any of these things.
Right.
Blogging isn't an inherited trait. Blogging and everything that goes into blogging, they're skills. And you need to practice. That's, again, why I say, spend an hour every single day writing, because you are practicing some of the most important skills that are going to go into your blog. they say you need 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything, which means I'm still not an expert at any of these things, right? But I'm making a lot of progress because I've spent so much time and continue to spend so much time doing these core things every single day.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss would dispute that 10,000 hour thing, but but I hear you.
Yeah.
So, Mike, this has been fascinating to hear your personal story. I want to transition now a little bit into some blogging tips, talk to you a little bit about what's working for you. Let me ask you this. What is your best source for blog traffic?
In terms of referrals?
In
like social networks and that sort of thing, or what?
Yeah.
Okay. My best overall source for traffic currently is Google search.
Google search.
Yeah. My organic search traffic is my number one source right now. And it's been that way for about 16 months or so, maybe 18 months. That's because I made some changes late 2014 that really helped my site's ranking and my content's ranking. Before that, it was Google Plus.
Okay, that's not surprising.
Yeah, and well, what's sad is that Google Plus has now fallen off the face of the earth for me.
Oh, really? For you too, huh?
Yes. Got 180 plus thousand followers there. The vast majority of which are unengaged, uninterested. I don't even know if they're using Google Plus anymore. So the content that I share there gets far less engagement and interest and certainly very, very little traffic compared to Twitter, Facebook, and some of the other social platforms. So fortunately for me, Google Plus was replaced. It's what's really sad is when you've got a blog and you've got content that's ranking well and you're getting traffic, and then you lose that source of traffic, and then there's nothing else there. That's happened to me. And actually, like I think before I really got into Google Plus, the number one driver before that was probably LinkedIn, and specifically LinkedIn groups. I'm talking like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and then some changes were made to LinkedIn groups, and now I don't get hardly anything from LinkedIn groups. And so that's just the nature of blogging. You can't rely on one particular source. You can't rest your laurels on, well, I'm getting great organic traffic today, I'm sure that's going to continue tomorrow. You don't know that. Right. Things can change relatively quickly. So that's why I think it's always important to be constantly tweaking and exploring and expanding your audience. Yeah. Into multiple areas. So that way, whenever there's a dip in one area, either you'll hopefully at least maintain the status quo in the other sources, or possibly even improve.
What's your take on Google Plus now, going forward? Well,
it's very saddening to me, quite frankly, because they made such a disruptive change in the platform that it impacted the culture that had formed on the network, which is really fascinating to me as both a social media marketer and a historian. I mean, it's funny because I mentioned, I focused on history in college, which you'd think, okay, well, the dude studied Mexico and Europe and Civil War and that kind of stuff, which I did. But it also kind of shaped how I look at things in the world. And that includes social media. I almost consider myself an historian of social networks. And I watch the phenomena, which is the cultural development and the sociological development on social media in general and on specific networks. And I was very much a part of the social norms that were going on in Google Plus through 2014 and 2015. But then the company, Google, made a shift because as a product, it apparently wasn't doing what they needed it to do. It wasn't accomplishing whatever goals that they'd set up. And there were changes in leadership. There were changes in the user interface. There were changes in functionality. Things were stripped off, photos, Hangouts, these things were pulled out of the Google Plus platform. Hangouts were not continued to be developed like they could have been. That could have continued to be a fantastic broadcast medium for people, like Facebook Live is becoming now. Google chose not to pursue those things, which is fine. Google's their own company; they can do what they want. But the impact was people like me stopped getting what we were getting out of that network.
Okay.
We stopped getting the conversations, the discussions, the connections that we were getting before. And when you take something like that away from somebody, most humans, they react most of the time by trying to replace that with something else. I'll give you a more recent example, and that's Blab.
Yeah.
Many people in your audience may have been using Blab or may have tried it out. I don't know if you were doing Blabs, but a lot of people started to use Blab to create audiences and create broadcasts, and we're seeing a lot of success from it.
Right.
It's a wonderful platform for that, but it wasn't what Blab wanted, so they had to pivot their company. And they literally forced everybody who was using it in that way to go find something else.
Yeah.
So now those people currently are all dispersed. Some of them are starting to play with Facebook Live. Some of them are using other platforms like Huzza and so on.
Yeah.
And, they had no choice. They had to go find a different tool, a different platform to accomplish what they'd been used to accomplishing up until that point. So Google Plus was that way. I still have, some of my best friends and our fantastic colleagues and peers, their relationships that were initiated thanks to Google Plus.
Right.
So I always owe Google a bit of a thanks for that. I probably would not know Jeff C. and Rebecca Radice and Peg Fitzpatrick, or at least be as close to them as I am today. I mean, I count them real close friends. I mean, these are people that I talk to every single day. We love it when we're able to see each other at conferences and that sort of thing. That's thanks to Google Plus, but that's no longer happening, right? I am not meeting anybody new on Google Plus. It's now just a broadcast medium because those discussions, at least in my circles and the communities that I were in, they just totally died off.
Yeah. That is sad to hear it coming from someone like you who has had tremendous success over there. I've backed off about a year ago from, I don't spend much time there. But to hear it from someone like yourself who's, got 130,000 followers and was just doing so well over there, that is sad.
Yeah. Like I said, fortunately, it wasn't a killer blow to me or my site or anything like that. It was just kind of emotional. Ugh, that kind of sucks.
Right.
But I'm getting, the Google organic traffic has continued to go up every month, and it's replaced, what I was getting from Google Plus, which is an ideal, by the way. It's nice to have referral traffic from social networks, but that's very tenuous because it's usually based on your most recent post. My old content doesn't tend to get a lot of social media traffic day to day. It's just whatever I've shared recently and people are looking at right now. And Google Plus was definitely that way. When I wrote how not to use Google Plus, I mean, that exploded, went viral, got a ton of traffic from Google Plus.
Right.
But that was an initial spike, right? I don't get 15,000 visits a day from Google Plus to that particular article. That was a one-time thing. Whereas Google organic search or Bing or Yahoo, that traffic, it's day after day after day to a lot of the same pieces of content, which is great. And even though something could potentially happen tomorrow, it's still unlikely that stuff's just going to drop off a day later. Hopefully it'll continue to grow. And it's rather reasonable to expect that not only will that traffic continue to grow to those posts as they continue to improve and rank, but new content that I add will also rank and continue to get traffic.
So, Mike, what social media platforms then are working for you?
Well, again, I'm kind of blessed to be in this space, talking about social media marketing, in that, I can use every platform. Personally, Twitter works very well for me. Facebook works well. LinkedIn, Pinterest. Those are probably my top ones right now. And that's mostly because I have a personal preference towards writing. I don't do audio. I do very, very little video. So you're not going to see me doing much on YouTube or Periscope, or those kinds of things. But any platform where I can create and improve on relationships with people, and I can create content on my site and share that content to that network, it works well for me.
So with all the SEO success you're finding, what SEO tools are you using?
I use SEMrush.
Okay.
Almost exclusively. The one other thing that I do use, Site Sales tool. They've got SBI and SBI for WP, and both of those packages come with access to their Brainstorm It tool, which is a keyword research tool. It's got to be one of the best on the planet, just because it's not going to give you back just results for a particular keyword that you search on, but it's going to give you hundreds, perhaps even thousands of variations and related keywords that you can explore. So if you're interested in writing about a particular topic, you can do a search and you can see exactly how you should be writing, what keywords you should be targeting that have the highest potential for that particular overall topic. So that's nice to have, to be able to figure out, okay, what should I be writing about? Or even maybe how should I go back and change some of the content that I've already written? I wrote a massive post. Well, let me back up. Back in 2013, when I was really getting into blogging, I wrote a post, how I promote my blog posts. And it was just a checklist for all the different things that I do to get my content out there. And it was hugely popular. So I kept updating it over the years. And then last summer, I published an entirely new version of it, expanded it. It was like 12,000 words. I called it blog promotionology, the study of how to promote blog posts. And I got very scientific about it, but essentially the same post, just bigger, right?
Wow.
And totally updated with new stuff, because I got kind of tired of doing strike throughs and updates and that kind of stuff. It was looking a little sloppy on the old post. So I cleaned it up, expanded it, made it into an ebook and everything. A lot of work into that post. And 12 months later, I found that it still wasn't performing anywhere near what I wanted it to do in Google search. And one of the reasons was I got too clever. I thought it was cute to make it seem like this was a course and make it sound like it had a course syllabus and therefore give it a name, blog promotionology. But nobody's searching for blog promotionology because it's a made-up word. What they are searching for is how to promote a blog post. So I recently I just changed it. I just changed the title. I changed the URL. I don't care. I know I'll have some broken links and that kind of stuff. So from one respect, I'm starting over a little bit. Ended up starting over on the social proof side too. But I know it's going to perform better in the long run.
Yeah.
Because I did the research. I looked up, blog promotion and promote blog and that kind of stuff. And, I knew that I know that this will work. So I've got, so that was from the Brainstorm It. And then, like I said, SEMrush helps me to identify issues. I love that it can do a weekly audit, automated, and I just get an email every week. Every Monday morning, I get an email from SEMrush. Actually, I get a couple different ones. But the basic idea is it's run a scan of my site, and it's going to tell me if there are any new issues whatsoever, so I can stay on top of it and not wait until there are literally hundreds and hundreds of issues that need to be fixed.
Okay.
Because I guarantee you, if you haven't been paying attention and now you go and you run an audit on your site, you're going to have lots of issues to fix. They may be minor things. They may be a bunch of pages that have no description or duplicate descriptions or no H1 title tag or whatever the case might be. But they add up, and if you're facing a report that says you've got 3,000 issues with your site, that's kind of intimidating, right? Yeah. It's going to take you a while to work through all of those because it's on probably 100 different pages, so you're going to spend an hour fixing one, and now you've got 99 more to go. But again, once you do that, that's again why SEMrush is so nice, and you have that weekly audit so that that never happens again, and you don't let it get that bad.
Interesting. Good to know. I'll be linking to SEMrush and everything that we talk about in the show notes. So, Mike, before we move on to monetization, you wrote a book a couple of years ago, I believe, called The Unofficial Book on Hootsuite.
Yeah.
Is Hootsuite still a good tool for bloggers?
Hootsuite's a great tool for bloggers. To be totally transparent, I don't use it every day anymore. I've kind of outgrown Hootsuite. And it's one of the interesting things where I almost don't like to tell people how I use social media because the typical blogger, the typical business owner isn't and probably shouldn't be using social media the same way that I do. I'm a social media marketer, so I've got to be this social butterfly that's I think needs to be on every social platform and publishing everywhere and doing those things. That's not the advice that I give most people. Most people I say, you have a top tier, one or two top priority social networks, and then a second tier where you're somewhat active, and then a third tier where you just have a presence and keep those prioritized that way because most people don't have time to be active on every network. So that's where, I've kind of outgrown Hootsuite. I've moved on to AgoraPulse because AgoraPulse, the monitoring is just phenomenal. I can log into the AgoraPulse app and quickly jump between my two different Twitter profiles, my two different Instagram profiles, my Facebook page, and so on, and see all of the comments and replies and direct messages and so on that I need to respond to and knock them out within 20, 30 minutes. And we're talking about hundreds. I think you use Triber. I use Triber. So every time I publish a new post, it goes through Triber and I get hundreds of people sharing it out. And each one of those shares has a mention of my Twitter handle on Twitter. And I like to thank people for sharing my stuff. Yeah. So I track that and I go through and I thank every single person, for sharing my stuff, particularly if I see that they've done it manually. If they actually went to the article and they hit that tweet button, I want to thank them. And the same is true on the other networks if I know that they did it. And I also want to make sure I respond to questions. And one of the cool things with AgoraPulse is by default, it will show you anytime anyone has ever shared anything from your site, whether they mention you or not. And this is really important because you might have somebody who's very influential who shares a piece of content from your site and they don't bother to @mention you. That share might send a bunch of traffic to your site, and if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't know. So that's why I say I've kind of outgrown Hootsuite. I still have an account there, and I still strongly recommend it if it makes sense. There are a bunch of social media tools out there, and I love a lot of them. And again, this is where I don't like to necessarily say too much about what I'm doing because it can be overwhelming. But I probably use 8 different tools.
Right.
Never really counted just the social media stuff, but I still use Hootsuite occasionally. I use AgoraPulse every single day. I still use Buffer. I use Tailwind. I use Post Planner. I use Social Oomph.
Okay.
Friends plus me. So we're getting up there already. And people are like, what? What are you smoking? You need to use all these different tools. Well, there isn't a single social media marketing tool that does everything. And so when you're active on so many different social networks, you're going to find that there isn't one tool that will suffice.
Okay.
So I use them all. But yeah, I mean, that was a rather lengthy answer to your question. That yes, I still recommend Hootsuite to bloggers, particularly if you're focused on Facebook and or Twitter, and you only have a few social profiles. And I say that because while you're going to want to pay attention to how those profiles are performing, if you only have a couple, your best bet is to use the native analytics. If you've got a Facebook page, use the page insights. It's fine. It tells you everything you want to know. Mm-hmm. What's nice when you have like a tool like Agorapulse or Simply Measured is you can bring in multiple platforms into one report, and you can see things, compare things, do that sort of thing. Hootsuite's reporting has never been anything other than a disaster. It's I know how to use it, and even I struggle to explain it to people who don't know how to use it, and they don't get it. I mean, I've written content about it. It's a whole chapter in my book, how to use Hootsuite reports. And people still don't get it because they use this crazy point system, and it makes no sense. If you know how to use it, it's actually pretty powerful that you can build whatever custom reports you want on the fly. You can immediately track any links that you share through Hootsuite, using their own shortened Owly links, and you can save those reports. So for instance, I used to have an Owly link. I used to have a bunch of different posts where I would have links to other posts, and I would use Owly links for all those links, and then I had a custom report that tracked them all, so I could tell how those links are performing. But that's a pretty specific use case. Yeah. Being able to have custom parameters already added to those links is super powerful. If I share a link to one of your articles using Hootsuite, I've got Hootsuite set up that it will automatically add UTM parameters, campaign equals Mike Allton. Okay. So that way, if you are in your Google Analytics, you might start seeing traffic coming from campaign Mike Allton.
Yeah.
Little trick.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's super niche. I mean, who does that besides me?
You obviously don't outsource your social media. Yeah.
No, never have.
Okay. I was just curious, a busy guy like you, but
yep.
That's also your expertise. So you need to know the latest and how each platform works. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like I need to be in there, but you're right. I am super busy, which means so sometimes there's gaps. I'll be the first to admit that I don't have the ideal social presence if I was just a business. If you look at the site sell properties or that kind of thing, it's totally different. I mean, we're consistent. Every single day we've got great posts going out, a mixture of our content, other people's content. I am not as exacting with my own social profiles because I don't have that kind of time. And like I said, it's all one big experiment for me. So I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to be anything, a certain way on my own profiles.
Okay. So Mike, let's go now into the final stretch of blog monetization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make some money.
Exactly. Because you recently did a roundup post on blog monetization where you asked 52 online business owners, including myself, what their best and worst blog monetization techniques have been. And you revealed that your best monetization technique is creating a one-to-one relationship with other brands and putting together a marketing plan that's monetized. So you say that this goes beyond your typical joint venture partnerships, that you like to work directly with a brand's CEO or marketing manager and partner with them to form sponsored content, webinars, or brand evangelism. So I'd like to talk to you about this for a minute. First, do you consider this to be the same thing as influencer marketing, what you're describing?
Not necessarily, because the phrase influencer marketing, that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean the brand developing relationships with individual bloggers and influencers so that they share your content, they talk about your brand online, and there might not be any direct monetization there at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could say that when I am developing relationships with my peers and colleagues, other people who are blogging specifically about social media and blogging, so that we can write about each other and share each other's stuff, that's also influencer marketing.
Okay.
I mean, not necessarily look at it that way, but technically it is. I've got a great relationship with Peg Fitzpatrick. She just shared that roundup. I saw the alert on my phone, because I messaged her on Facebook and said, hey, this post went live. She didn't have time. She was traveling, so unfortunately she wasn't able to participate. But I said, here it is. It's live, and hopefully next time we do a roundup, you can be in on it. I didn't ask her to share it, but she did. Mm-hmm. Because we have that relationship, and she's happy to support me, and I love sharing her stuff all the time because it's fantastic. So it is, to me, different from influencer marketing, what I was talking about in that particular post. Mm-hmm. I was talking about, becoming this, in part becoming an influencer for a brand, certainly, and using the influence that I have created as a blogger. Right. Over the past 4 years, I've developed an audience for myself, my personal brand, and for the social media hat. I've got blog readers. I've got social media followers. I've got email subscribers. So that way, when I want to say something, I have a platform to reach that audience. That's what Michael Hyatt talks about that I just love. He tries to help you understand that you may have all these different networks and tools and websites and so on, but combine them all together, and this is your platform. Mm-hmm. It's what politicians used to have to literally speak on. Today we just talk about the Democratic platform or Republican platform to be the issues that they stand for. But in the 1800s, Calvin Coolidge and other politicians who wanted to run for office in this country, they would have a horse and carriage, and they would have to ride in, and then behind that they would have another horse pulling a long platform is what they called it, but it was basically now I can't think of the word.
Like a stage? Yeah,
kind of, because they would be going into small towns that didn't necessarily have anything, they might have a church and a pulpit, but that may not necessarily work for them politically and ideologically. So they didn't necessarily have theaters. They didn't have amphitheaters or anything like that. So they had to bring their stage with them. Mm-hmm. And that's what they would do. They would roll into town, and they would stand up on their platform, and they would introduce themselves literally for the first time. These are people who would not have ever heard of them any other way. There was no news, or anything like that. And they would introduce themselves and say, this is who I am. This is what I'm running for, and this is what I believe. And so today, that's what we have as individuals. We have these platforms.
Right.
And our audience are people whom we have some measure of influence over.
Right.
And what I always enjoy doing is finding specific brands whom I can work with, and either one of two ways. Either we're just leveraging my audience and my influence specifically, or I may be helping them to do the same thing with their audience, or even broader, work with even more bloggers, right, and do some blogger outreach so that they can reach an even bigger audience.
It sounds very similar to brandscaping.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a good book.
Yep, that's right.
So, okay, so help us understand, Mike, what then does a blogger need to have in place to make these partnerships that you're describing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually a couple things, and it starts with having something on your site that indicates to brands that you're open to this. It might be an advertising page. And I know a lot of people struggle with this because I say advertising, and in their minds, they're thinking display ads,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily, that's not the end all be all of advertising. Sponsored content is advertising. Sponsored social posts is advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Webinars, these are all advertising for the brand. So you just make it clear on an advertising page, advertisers, whatever you want to call it, that these are the things that you're open to doing. And maybe it is display ads. I mean, if you're running Google AdSense on your site, I'll tell you this right now, if you're running Google AdSense, you should be very open to having a brand come in and put up a display ad, because you can get a 6-month contract from a brand that's going to be far more than what you're probably making off of Google AdSense.
Very good point.
It's going to be far more lucrative, far more personal, far more rewarding. I mean, these Google ads, you got no idea what an individual is seeing. So there's no connection to you and the content that's being displayed in those dynamic ads. Whereas, if you want to work with a brand like Agorapulse, I mentioned them earlier, and put a display ad up for them on your site, you're going to see that every day. Your visitors are going to see that same ad every day, and it's going to be more effective.
It's going to mean something to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have that page on your site that says, these are the things that these are the ways that you can work with us as a brand. Speak to that brand and tell them, you can do display ads on these pages, on these categories, whatever the case might be. We're open to working with you on sponsored content. We can do, whatever the case might be. There's a whole list of things that you might do, and consider putting.
What would you call that page?
Well, in the display ad world, we would call that a rate sheet.
Okay.
If you want to work with a newspaper or a magazine or online print, something like that, you want to look at their rate sheet to see what it costs to advertise with them. These days, it's probably best just to have a page called advertisers, and you put it in the bottom of your site where you put your contact and your privacy policy and all that kind of stuff. So that way, as a brand, it's easy for me to find that. As a brand, I know what that means. I see a link that says advertisers. I know you're talking to me because I'm thinking about advertising on your site. And it's important to understand that is the perception, when a brand comes to your site and they see some of the other things that you're doing. They see the ads. They see the content that you're writing. They see the brands that you're already talking about. It occurs to them that they might want to work with you. So that's actually the other thing that bloggers should be doing, is finding ways to work with brands and mention brands, whether you're getting paid for it or not. That's how you can demonstrate that you're open to that, in addition to having that page, because if they don't see that page, they're not going to know. But if they're on an article that you've written and you mention them or you mention their competitors, either way, they're going to be thinking, oh, this might be someone that we could work with.
Yeah, very good point. Very good. So in the roundup about blog monetization, excuse me, that you just did, you mentioned a tool called, is it Trapeze?
Yeah. And we're really excited about this. It's completely transparent. It's a tool that SiteSell has built. So I'm part of the team that built this tool. It was supposed to be initially just for SiteSell members. So for those of you in the audience who don't know, SiteSell helps people build an online business. You've got a passion for something, whether it's growing cactuses or helping people, learn how to organize their kitchens, whatever the case might be. SiteSell helps you figure out specifically what that passion really is, what that niche is, and then build a business. There's tools, the educational material, everything you need to know, everything you need to use to actually build an online working content-based site. Not so much a blog, but an online content-rich site, a theme-based site, we call it. And so we've got, 10,000 members. I mean, these are people with current sites, not historically, but 10,000 people right now who have active sites. They're solopreneurs. And this specifically, how they monetize, how they find and work with brands is a challenge for them. They've got these sites, they've got these great sites, and they're using the automated tools, the easy tools like Google AdSense and Amazon affiliates and so on. But we know the more lucrative relationships are those one-on-one relationships where they work directly with a brand who has a product or a service that is particularly well suited for that audience that solopreneur has already established. So we wanted to build a kind of a network, a kind of exchange. And the more we thought about it and talked about it, the more we realized, well, this is going to be great for our SBIers, our Site Some members, but wouldn't it be even better if the rest of the world could jump in, right? Because if it's closed to SBIers, that means it's only those 10,000 people who can interact back and forth. And that wouldn't help them get noticed by a larger brand, or even just a really successful solopreneur with a great product out there that isn't part of that community. So that's what we did. We launched it earlier this year, the first phase, which is to allow people with sites to sign up. And you can sign up for free and you can create a listing. You can apply to have a listing. The listing does go through an algorithm. So you're not going to have a listing if your site's not getting traffic or you don't have a good social presence. It's a tool both for the solopreneurs and or publishers, as we might call them. And on the other side, the brands or the advertisers. Those brands, once we open it up to brands, will be able to search all of the Trafees listings by whatever keywords they want and identify individual bloggers and solopreneurs and site owners that are reaching an audience. I mean, verified reaching, right? An audience that would be interesting to them, that they know their product or service is a good fit for, and then they can reach out to them. So it's going to be a really fantastic way for bloggers to be found by really, really spot on target brands.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I'm going to definitely check it out more. I'm just curious, is there an affiliate program for Trafees?
No, because it's all free.
Okay.
So
right.
It's totally free to sign up. It's totally free to create a listing. Like I said, the only catch there is it's a listing application. Your site does have to be getting certain levels of traffic, and we look at a bunch of different things: Alexa ranking, SimilarWeb, SEMrush score, to make sure that it's getting reasonable numbers of traffic, and we're continuing to develop that so that it takes into consideration niche. And then we also look at whatever social profiles you give us and try to score those as well. So that way brands can see that you're getting so much traffic and that you have so much influence on Twitter, and they can understand that, that's the kind of, relationship they can create with you.
Yeah.
And then when they contact you, there's no fee there either. I mean, there's never any fees associated with Trafees. We're talking about monetization. So again, to be totally transparent, our monetization model eventually will probably be ads or something along those lines. We will monetize the traffic coming to Trafees.
Okay.
But that's down the road.
Yeah.
And we want to see what we've really got and see what kind of a success rate we can make out of it. But for the people who sign up and create listings, and for the people who want to use it to reach those listings, it's 100% free.
Fascinating. Wow. I'll definitely link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, please. And right now it's super important for everybody who's listening to go to Trafees.com and sign up and create a listing, because right now we're in what we call phase 2, which is to allow anybody who wants to create a listing to go on and apply for a listing. We cannot open it up to phase 3, which is when we allow brands to come in and begin to search, until we think, about 5,000 listings. This is super critical, because if I let a brand in right now we're about 1,000 to 2,000 listings or so. So we're approaching halfway to our goal. If I let a brand come in right now and start searching, odds are they're not going to find results. You don't
Okay.
have enough listings across a wide enough spectrum of categories to ensure that most brands are going to see some people. And, just imagine if you're one of the first people to use eBay, you went onto eBay and you were searching for a part for your Corvette and there was just nothing, no results.
Mm.
Are you ever going to use eBay again? No. It was a big flop for you. So why would you go back and waste your time searching on that again? That's the experience we can't afford with
Right.
brands. So it's critical that we get as many people to sign up right away, because the faster we get to that 5,000 plateau, and we're going to be doing tests, so we're going to be testing all kinds of different keyword searches, so we'll know as we get closer whether or not we're really reaching that threshold. But when we reach that threshold, that's when we can let brands in, and that's when people will actually start to see those relationships and those monetization options occur.
Yeah, well, I will go sign up and encourage others to do the same. It's free. What do you got to lose, guys?
Exactly. Yeah. It takes about 5 minutes,
Okay.
and then you'll have a listing out there. Eventually, once we get into phase 3 and everything's running along, we'll probably have widgets and things that people can put on their sites, because it'll be nice for both bloggers and brands that everything's vetted, everything's scored. You'll be able to rate each other, kind of like Fiverr,
Mhm.
so you're not going to, try to waste your time on a gig for somebody that's got no rating or poor rating.
Mhm.
So that mutual assurance will be happening.
Oh, great. Good. Now, on the flip side, interestingly, continuing our conversation, wrapping up here on monetization, your roundup concluded that the two worst monetization techniques are banner ads and lack of focus.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. Now the banner ads, that wasn't surprising.
Right.
The lack of focus was interesting. Can
Yeah.
you talk about lack of focus, what it looks like for the blogger and solopreneur, and how they can remedy a lack of focus?
Absolutely. Yeah. This roundup was so fascinating. Like you said, it was 52 different people. And one of the interesting things was that they're not even close to being all the same. These aren't 52 content bloggers. These are 52 people that they've got online businesses of one kind or another, but they're not all bloggers, right? You've got like Nathan Chan of Founder Magazine, who's got a massive social presence and this really great online publication, not technically a blog, so how he approached those questions was different from how you and I approach those questions, and everybody else is different. But it was fascinating to see some of the same kinds of responses bubble up over and over again. A lack of focus certainly was one. And what it meant to me and what I saw it meaning to a bunch of the people that brought it up was not having a very clear strategy in place for both your blog and your monetization and your audience, and understanding just how focused it needs to be. Lack of focus wasn't necessarily talking about your day-to-day, having that time set aside to write and being focused on what you're supposed to be doing each and every day. It's more about understanding who your audience is and just how narrow you get in what you're writing about and who you're writing to. I'll give you a personal example. When I started the social media hat, I didn't write just about social media or blogging. I also wrote about SEO and email marketing and marketing in general, technology. There are posts on there about email signatures and postcards and virtually any kind of business marketing, even business furniture. I mean, there's such a wide range of content, because in my mind, I thought that if I'm writing content that is simply of interest to business owners, that's a good thing, because maybe they'll read a post about how Star Trek technology is becoming a reality today, and then they'll go on to read my post about how to do Facebook ads, which is the kind of content I really want them to read, because then that might lead them to hiring me to help them with that. Yeah, that doesn't happen. Let me just glue all your readers in, all you listeners in. That doesn't actually happen. People will read those random articles that you write. There's no doubt. That Star Trek article, bless its soul. It continues to get traffic today, but it doesn't actually convert into any meaningful relationships. They don't subscribe to the blog. They don't go on to read other pieces of content. When I blogged about Apple's live events and the newest iPhone 5S, blah, 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 that was interesting to some people at the time, but it did not help my blog. So now those are just wasted pieces of content. I wasted my time writing them. I wasted my time promoting them. They're wasting space on my site. When I narrowed my focus to specifically content marketing and the things you need to know to be successful at content marketing, which is blogging, social media, and email marketing, those are the 3 things that I write about today.
And that's it.
That's it. I still love Apple. I use all the Apple products, and it makes me kind of itch when there's an Apple live event because I love to live blog and Newsjack and that kind of thing, but it doesn't help me. It's just a waste of my time to do those things. So I trimmed all that out. I focus on these specific things. And quite frankly, I'm still not focused enough. It's great that I've got these 3 topics. Now, I know I'm only going to write about social media, blogging, and email marketing, but who am I writing to? That's still an area where I haven't yet focused enough. I haven't yet determined whether I'm writing to bloggers or small business owners or corporations. I'm still a little bit all over the place. And that's a challenge for me, and it's a challenge for my blog. I guarantee you, if I was writing specifically about content marketing, specifically for corporations, I would be even more successful than I am today.
Yeah. Do you think narrowing that focus is just, you just have to have time to figure that out?
Well, it depends. It helps when you use tools and you do some keyword research. I mentioned Brainstorm it earlier. There's other ones. SEMrush has some keyword research capability, Majestic, even just Google Keyword Planner or whatever it's called today. Right. You can use those tools to understand what the actual market looks like and not use your own preconceived bias. And this may come across a little harsh to some people who are listening and some bloggers, but just because you're excited about a particular topic doesn't mean it's a good business model. It doesn't mean other people are going to be as excited as you are. You have to take the time to find that out for sure, because if you don't, you will find out for sure, but it might be a year or 2 from now after you've been blogging and trying and scratching your way out for months, only to realize that there's not enough interest out there in this, or I'm too all over the place.
Yeah.
To get people excited about what I really want them to be excited about.
Right. Do you find that the bigger the niche, the more opportunity there is out there?
No, not necessarily, because what happens is the bigger the niche, that's potentially more competition.
Absolutely.
I guess it depends on what we mean by bigger. If we just mean instead of 15,000
well, I should
people,
say, maybe I should say the narrower the niche.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, the narrower the niche, the more opportunity to an extent. You can get too narrow. If you narrow it so far down that there's virtually nobody searching on that particular niche on a month-to-month basis, it's too narrow.
Okay, right.
And it's, in fact, I don't mean to turn this into a commercial for Brainstorm it, but that's actually one of the cool things about that keyword tool is that when you're doing a search, you can actually tell it to ignore the stuff that's too narrow and too broad. So you don't even see that stuff in your results. The keywords that just don't get any searches or get millions of searches every month, and therefore it's just unreasonable to expect to compete. And
Right.
that what you want to look for is that stuff in the middle. You want to find that sweet spot where it's a topic that you've got a good amount of people who are actively searching for that particular topic or related topics every single month, but there isn't too much competition already in place.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity that you're looking for.
Yeah, I just thought it would be good to clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
lack of focus. You wanna have a laser focus on your target and produce the content in accordance to that.
Right. And then by extension then is the monetization, right? Because once you figured out your focus topic, your niche, and you figured out what your audience is going to be, and some of these things you're right. I mean, this may take a long time to really get all this figured out. I'm still trying to figure out my audience part. But once you figure that out, then you can focus your monetization.
Right.
You know, my example before, if I decide I'm going to focus on a corporate audience, then display ads is absolutely going to be a total waste of my time. They're not going to click on display ads. They're just not. They're
Right.
going to be looking for relationships. They're going to be looking for high-end recommendations, right? They're going to want to talk to me about Hootsuite Enterprise.
Yeah.
For
Especially AdSense ads are not going to work.
Oh yeah, that's totally going to be a waste. You know, they're not going to click on little links inside. You know, it's just, you know, but on the other hand, if I'm, and this isn't a judgment, but if I'm if I'm focusing on bloggers, individual bloggers,
Mm-hmm.
as a group, they're probably going to be more inclined to be receptive to the kinds of monetization opportunities that might be conveyed through a display ad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might see the ad for Agorapulse that's on my sidebar right now and be intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not AdSense. That's
No, that's not AdSense.
right.
No.
That's your own, like you said, you made that ad yourself.
It's a display ad, but it's
Display
not
ad
AdSense
that you did yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which I agree. I think that would be a better way to go than some picture of some weird bug, and this one thing helps you cure cancer. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, like you mentioned my book, and for a while I was still blogging regularly about Hootsuite, and so I would have a graphic about my book in the sidebar, and those two together were extremely effective. Actually, two graphics,
Yeah.
one for the book, one just to try Hootsuite's free trial. So people would be reading a piece of content about Hootsuite, about what you can do with Hootsuite, and as they're reading it, they notice that they could go read a book about Hootsuite for a few bucks, or they could go try Hootsuite for free.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That kind of stuff together, worked really well. Now that I'm not writing about Hootsuite as much as I used to, I've had to kind of back off on the display ads because there's no longer that direct context between most of the content that's being read on my site.
Yeah, and bloggers need to understand that AdSense isn't going to always automatically pull up like Hootsuite as one of their ads.
No, the AdSense is more likely today to bring up something totally unrelated to your site, but trying to be related to what that person's been visiting or searching on recently. So it might, if they've been researching cars, they're gonna see car ads
Right.
on your site. That's just the reality.
Yeah. The way these 25 actresses look today is crazy. I mean,
Yeah, for those of you listening, he's talking about related content that I keep testing because I keep hoping somebody gets it right. Shareaholic offers it, Discus offers it. If you go to CNN, or places like that, you'll see it at the bottom of the articles, powered by services like Outbrain or Tabula. And, they'll do a grid of other articles, other stories that you might be interested in, but they can't seem to get away from clickbait garbage.
yeah.
No matter what. And I keep trying to work with them and say, look, this isn't going to work. I've tried it. It doesn't work on my audience, and it's not going to work on other sites like mine that are specific niche focused. But they don't, I don't know. I don't know if they've got supply issues or it's a demand issue where they're making plenty of money off CNN and other kinds of just general news sites.
Let's face it, the clicks is where the money is, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we're all susceptible to garbage temptation like junk food.
Yeah.
So Mike, if someone wants to connect with you online, where can they find you?
Well, the socialmediahead.com is my hobby site, my personal blog. That's where all my best content is. And other than that, you can follow me on Twitter, Mike_Allton. That's ALLTON. And love to connect. I have so much content on my site. Like I said, I've been blogging for so long. I used to blog 6 to 14 times a week.
Wow.
Obviously scaled that back because I'm pretty busy. It's easy to blog that often when you don't have work, to be perfectly frank. That's not the case anymore. But these days I try to publish at least once a week, sometimes twice. So that means I've got a lot of stuff and it's hard to find. So if you're looking for something, if you have questions, you want to know how to do something, the odds are I've got an article I can steer you to, or at least somebody else that I can recommend. So by all means, come to me with your questions. Happy to help.
Yeah, your site is fabulous. Socialmediahat.com. Mike Allton, I want to thank you for coming on the Blog Chronicles.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me. We'll have to get together soon.
Definitely. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe on YouTube or iTunes and leave a rating or review to help other bloggers find us. If you want to chat, look me up on Twitter @MattLoomis. So who is going to be my next guest on the Blog Chronicles? She lives and blogs in Bucharest, Romania, and makes a full-time living from her blog by offering a very specific skill set to clients that helps them bring in more website visitors and potential customers. She's become a self-taught expert in roundup posts and makes a nice living creating them for other brands. She's only 27 years old and already living the internet lifestyle. So join me on the next episode of the Blog Chronicles to find out who she is and hear her personal online career story. See you there.